KMMU.org. That is, I hate it when I do that. I got to write this down. You're listening to Mainstream Media in Utah. And we're really happy to have you with us. You can listen to us and watch us on Rumble and Facebook and all the social media sites and on the radio at kmmu.org. So we are super happy to have you. We have a great lineup today. You are listening to the Liberty Moms show. And this is your host, Dalane England. Liberty Moms are the original Secretaries of Defense. We are the real defenders of the home front. And we are there when it comes to defending our families and our communities. And we have great Liberty Moms and a Liberty Dad with us today. We're going to start with an amazing Liberty Mom, Christina Boggess. She is on this Utah State School Board right now. She is also a candidate running for Utah State Senate. We also have Trevor Lee that will be joining us, who is currently representative in House 17, I believe. An amazing representative, really doing a fantastic job. He's also a candidate. We also have Monical Wilbur, who is also running for the state school board. And we also have Kristin Richey, who is, she's a Liberty Mom. She's on the front lines. She's with Eagle Forum, and we are going to talk about what happened yesterday at the special session and the regular intern. Very fascinating, quite an amazing day, an absolute filled day with a lot of way cool stuff happening and amazing stuff, not so cool stuff. But we're going to start with Christina Boggess, Liberty Mom Christina. We're so happy to have you with us, Christina. It has really been fun. I have loved having you on the state school board more than you have probably loved being on the state school board, but at least someone's enjoying it, right?
Yeah.
Not you. It's definitely me and a lot of others. So, Christina, we might get time to talk about the state school board. I hope so. But what I really want to focus on, because elections are coming up in just days, you're running for the Utah State Senate. So why did you decide to switch branches out of the state school board? Why are you running for the state Senate?
Well, I think that's a manifold issue. So I've been involved at the legislature, as you know, for many years, and I've observed some things that cause me some consternation, and I've learned that they go very deep. It's a deeply rooted issue that is in the infrastructure there, and by infrastructure I mean the social dynamic, the sociology of the Congress itself, and how that plays out. And so I knew that there were issues in our legislature, but it wasn't something that I was going to jump in head first. I actually had some people sit down in my living room and ask me to run. And when I said, "Oh, you want me to what?" And I was like, "Okay." And the words that I remember clearer than anything is that we need a conservative in this seat. And so they were asking for a conservative in Utah Senate 16. And so I actually had a lot of consternation about that. And I went and I started digging in and doing some pretty heavy duty research, some deep dives, some, everything from sponsored legislation to voting records to anything you can imagine. In fact, I got really deep into the money and I started following the money. And I too became very concerned about my own representative. And so when things like that happen, you go, okay. And I thought about it. I had engaged with some other people. And after a lot of prayer, I decided, okay, if this is what the Lord has called me to do, I will do it. And so I tipped my hat and put my hat in the ring for Utah Senate 16. And I can talk to you a little more about that if you have other questions. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. What I'd really like to know, yes, it definitely does. So what are some specific issues that set you apart from your opponent? Like, what are some specific, is it mostly voting record, or is it the ties to the establishment and the money? Which specifically is your biggest concern?
Well, I have no ties to establishment and money, and you can see that in my disclosures. And my opponent has lots of ties to establishment and money. You can see that in his disclosures. In fact, there is a couple numbers I'll share with you. During election years, my opponent took in over $90,000 in pass-through PAC and corporate money. And during non-election years,
$90,000?
$90,000 in pass-through PAC and corporate contributions. In election year, or in non-election years rather, so we're talking 21, 22, and 23, my opponent took in $72,000 in pass-through PAC and corporate money. And I don't know why we would be taking in money during non-election years. I think that's a question that the voter has to ask themselves, and I think they have to cogitate and resolve the cognitive dissonance that comes with going, why are they taking in money during non-election years? That seems weird. Contributions from Pfizer and pharmaceutical companies. My opponent has contributions from Dominion. In fact, he's got many contributions from those who he is required to adjudicate while he serves in the state Senate, which as a constituent, it causes me great consternation when I see people who would come before him to be adjudicated, and they're giving him money during both non-election years and election years. That causes me consternation. And not only that, there's money in his account from companies that profited from COVID vaccines and other legislative decisions. And then I started looking at how his money was spent, and we've got over $23,000 of this money being attributed to travel. Well, I don't know about you, Dalane, but for me to rack up $23,000 in travel, I have to go to places outside this state.
I can have a really good time on $23,000 the way I travel.
I could too.
I can really take a pretty amazing trip around the world for $23,000.
Yeah, you could take a trip around the world for $23,000.
Well, not everywhere, but I'm not in Utah. Like I'm saying, I can go to a lot of really cool places for $23,000.
Oh yeah,
not
I can take my whole family on a couple trips for 23 grand, right?
I can do pretty good. I can get a long ways on 23,000.
Yeah,
I don't stay in 5-star hotels either.
Yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The deep dive includes a nice tabbed out spreadsheet and some formulas and functions where it just causes your eyeballs to pop out. And another one of the reasons I decided to run was, believe it or not, taxes. I started to dig into taxes, and I am a fiscal conservative. I'm a hardcore fiscal conservative. I think that government money needs accountability, but I also believe that the power to tax is the power to control. And I don't want to give the government power. I believe in the autonomy and the liberty of the individual. And so when I started seeing the bludgeoning budget, and some people are like, no, you mean burgeoning. I'm like, no, I mean bludgeoning. Like, it is a heavy burden to bear. It is this like beat down on the Utah taxpayer. And so I started looking into taxes. And I started looking into it in particular because it's something my opponent lists as one of his gifts. And so I was like, well, what are we doing? What are we sponsoring? And I'm seeing bills that are, I call them placation bills. And some of them are run by my opponent. Some are run by other members of the legislature. And it's a bill that addresses a problem, if you would like to quote it. And so it provides a placebo to public concern, but it's accepted into nothingness. And as someone who works at the legislature, I know you know what I mean by exception clauses.
Absolutely.
It'll have great language, and it'll say, except as, except as, except as. And pretty soon you've neutered a really great bill through exception clauses. And so what I'm seeing is this, I call it propaganda because that's what I believe it is. It's this propaganda coming out of our state legislatures, slaters that says, hey, we're doing this great job on taxes, when in reality, Utah's budget has more than doubled in a decade. Mm-hmm. So our budget has more than doubled.
Yes, it has.
Well, our population has not doubled. Our tax-paying population has certainly not doubled. So if you don't have 2 times the tax-paying citizens to take on the more than double budget, then the tax-paying citizens get more than double taxes.
Have to. And with the technology and the things that we have, we should be becoming more efficient, not more burdened. And with Utah being the 11th highest state in the nation, 11th highest taxed state in the nation, that tells us like we are in the wrong direction. We're at one of the tops. We have almost every tax there is in Utah.
Yes. And I'm finding that they shift taxes. So for example, there are gosh, I could, my mind was blown. So if you get to know me well, Dalane, you know I have a left brain and a right brain,
Yes.
and I deliver in boxes. So I have this very analytical brain, and then I have this other side of my brain, and it blew my mind to look at how not only were tax cuts accepted into nothingness, but there were also tax cuts that were merely tax shifts. The government was still taxing the people at the same rate or at a higher rate. They just moved the location of the tax. And so it really didn't help people. And our government, our legislature is overspending, which then contributes to inflation. And I've been accused of conflating inflation and taxation, and I'm like, absolutely not. I understand the difference, and the rate at which our legislature and our government overspends has contributed to our overwhelming tax burden in more ways than I can possibly imagine, and we've got to get that under control. We spend more money in this state on government. I call them pet projects. I'm like, why are we giving money to this? It's crazy. And being at the legislature, you'll see the appropriations committee, they meet, and then they meet with all the major players, right? And it's there and it's public. And then there's all these special interest groups that come in and ask for money.
Oh,
and I'm thinking,
the first 2 to 3 weeks of the session is appropriations, where definitely government agencies and other entities are just asking to give us money. And once you get in and you get approved, they don't. I've never seen it. It could happen, but it's not very likely. Once they approve it, the next year it's not, can we get money? It's like, can we get more money? How much can we get? Once they're in, it seems like they're in for like good. And it's real hard to ever get them out. And then they just kind of give them more. Because, like, of course, inflation, the expenses, they're growing, their entity. So it's very dangerous. I have a really hard time going into those committees the first 3 weeks, because it's real hard.
To me, it was overwhelming to dig into that data sheet.
Yes.
And not just because if you've ever opened the data sheet on government, the numbers alone and the number of tabs and all the links here, there, and wherever, that can be overwhelming. But once you get over that and you're like, oh, it's just data. And then you start looking for where the money is going, your eyeballs start to just get really big. And it's that aha moment that the Utah taxpayer is being beaten to death with their tax burden for pet projects, for pilot projects. A lot of our money is going out of state. I saw a meme that said we've got $8.4 billion or something like that going to education, but a huge, massive chunk of that money is never seen on the front lines, ever. And we're not talking about a couple mil. We're not talking about a blip on the radar. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars that is never seen on the front line of K-12. And I guess, another reason I'm running, you want to talk about that, is we need truthfulness from our legislators. If the legislature makes the decision that, hey, we need to spend taxpayer dollars this way, that's fine. If that's the decision that they make and that their constituents have endorsed or ratified, so to speak, by putting them in office, great. But let's tell the truth about it.
Right. I just love, it's all about telling the truth. And it's sad, if the citizens vote for their own bondage, they should do it knowing they're voting for their own bondage. And we should like transparency and see it. And people do of their own free will vote for their own bondage. They do.
And I see that a lot in this state. I do see that a lot, where we've voted for our own bondage. We've voted for things, the tax, or the food tax bill that was so controversial in 2019 moving into 2020, affected many elections. My opponent voted for that. He voted for the gas tax of 2015.
That one is, that one, I find that one is so horrific. I find it inexcusable. It's kind of one of those things that I never like to, vote or against someone on one issue or one bill, but that one is a big one. Like, that one scores real high on my radar, because it causes inflation. It causes the cost of everything to go up. And it's one of those bills where it's real hard to reverse. Once you have a gas tax, try to reduce it, try to get it down. And people, they everyone has to buy gas. And every good and every service is dependent on gas. So it influences and impacts everything in your daily life. And it's not like property tax. You write one great big huge honking check.
And gas tax just nickels and dimes you to death.
But you don't even notice it. You don't even know you're paying it because it's included, hidden in the cost of gas. That one
Absolutely.
is a horrible one.
And it affects people who may have a larger commute time. For example, I know families who could no longer afford the property tax. They couldn't afford the cost of housing. And they thought, wow, you know what? The market is this way. It's shifting. I had former constituents who sold their home within District 16. They moved to Tooele, but kept their jobs here in the city.
Right.
And so that they could afford to live. They did the math. They did some fiscal management within their own home. And they said, this is what we need to do. And then that gas tax hammered them because they were both driving back and forth from Tooele every day for work. And so we see it disproportionately affect people who have made decisions based upon the climate and the taxation. And if you live in District 16, you're either living in Granite or Jordan School District. Both districts have levied a property tax increase that is very significant, over 20% in almost every one of the past 4 years. I would have to go back and look at that because sometimes when you represent multiple districts, you confuse the year and the district.
Right.
But it just shocks me. And for example, if you live in Harriman, some homes saw a 40% increase in their taxes over the last election cycle. So it does that. And when income tax is tied directly to education, when the income tax goes down, are you tracking with me?
I am.
And local LEAs want something, and there's no check. In fact, the bill that was run to put a check on property tax increases through the legislature, so the local LEA can levy property tax. There was a bill that was run to put a check on those increases. It was derailed in a Senate committee. It made it through the House. It was derailed in a Senate committee. I don't know what happened in that committee. I just know my opponent serves on that committee. And there are so many things that are wrong with that bill not making it to the finish line. We either fix it so that we have a check for the people, or we say what we want it to do and ship it back to the House for ratification. Something needs to happen. But taxes. Can I just tell you, Dalane, taxes? My mind has been blown in my research in taxes, and I want to see this state stop funding non-government entities. I would like them to, the billions of dollars spent funding non-government entities is overwhelming to me. We have contracts that come through where in the bill it will actually say that they're going to allocate a fiscal note for someone to monitor the project instead of assigning that monitoring to the government agency. So then we're paying a third party to do what a government agency would do. And I don't have all the answers. What I do know is there has to be a better way because our government has gotten so big. And I love that you know that the 11th tax burden in the nation. I love that you know that. Because a lot of my constituents don't know that.
No, they have no idea.
What a lot of people don't know is depending on the day of the week, we tie for 10th. There's a live thing that goes, it's the Utah debt clock. There's a couple other live things. And depending on the day of the week, the Utah tax burden, we tie for 10th. And it shocks people. They're like, wait, what? In super duper, super majority red Utah, we tax like a blue state.
We do. And the reason that we do it, the way that we do it so artfully is that we have every tax. So we're like, oh, our property tax isn't as high as California or New York. No, it isn't. Neither is the value of our property. And then we have income tax. We have sales tax. And now they want to introduce a service sales tax. And so none of our taxes are as high, the amount or the percentage is as high as other states, but we have more of them. We have all of them, and most states only have 2 or 3. We have three. We have all three of the main ones, plus many others. Plus, they want to introduce a fourth, service sales tax, and that's something that we're going to be working on big time when this election.
Can I just tell you how excited I am to know that someone's going to be working on that?
Oh,
if I can take you back to it's called I think it was in 2019, came in during the interim in December. It was coined the food tax bill, but it was really a catastrophic restructuring of the tax system in Utah.
It's a restructuring. Yeah.
And what I'm seeing is that I called it the slow installation of that bill. What we've seen from 2020 into 24 is they've taken that bill that was so controversial and they've broken it into pieces.
Yes.
And they've slowly implemented it one at a time. So the people got all up in arms because it was in a big, large package.
Yep.
But the legislature has implemented that bill. They have slowly but surely implemented that bill. And that bill had a 35% tax increase on gas, 177% on food. It was overwhelming. There were new taxes. There were increases in taxes that already existed. And now what we're seeing come out of our legislative sessions is the slow implementation of the food tax bill. And I think it was 19. I think it had a 19 on it. But it was in December of 2019 that it came through. It's on my website. Yes. And I take great issue with that. So I'm so sorry. I got stuck on taxes because clearly I'm a little passionate about it.
Well, it is a way that people are lured into a slow form of bondage without realizing it. They don't realize it, but it takes a huge chunk of your labors, of your work, of your literal life, your time and the value that you create. And then the government comes in and just takes. And you know, we do balance our budget in the state of Utah. We do, but we're dependent 27% on the federal government. And I don't know, have you noticed? Like, does the federal government have any money? Oh, well, $4 trillion in debt, and we're 27% dependent on an entity, a bureaucracy that's printing money and borrowing money and spending as if they actually had some money.
Yes, and
get off the goal.
You know, we could both just like this right at the kitchen table, right? Because it's so frustrating when somebody used that. Somebody actually in a town hall, they said to me, "Oh, but that bill didn't cost any money because the feds paid for it." Right. And I looked them right in the eye and I said, "How does the federal government procure money to give states money?"
Right.
And this it was a gentleman. His eyes just got really big, and I said, "Who do you think they're going to tax to give Utah money?"
Right.
They're going to tax Utah.
And they're going to tax you, my friend. You.
Yeah.
Personally. They're taxing you to give it back to Utah.
Exactly.
Waste.
And it brings me to a whole nother conversation where people say, I'm opposed to federal strings. I'm opposed to federal regulations. But yet our legislature continues to accept the federal dollar that we know is bound so tight. It is strangled with chains of imprisonment.
Yes.
Utah has made so many policies and it has approved. They vote, literally, our legislature has voted our own imprisonment. I don't believe we are a sovereign state. I know that that's controversial to say. I'm going to say it anyway. I believe we are a managed colony at this point because when we run good legislation, we accept it into nothingness. There were many bills that were around this last legislative session, except as provided by the federal government in this code, except as this. By the time you ran through all the exception clauses, the bill was neutered.
It's neutered, totally neutered.
And we have to stop doing that. And we have to have legislators and representatives that are willing to say, I will not vote for a budget, balanced or not, that's backfilled by the feds. Utah, in order to be sovereign, we pay our own bills. If we want to be a financially independent state, we need to assert ourselves as such, and we need to figure out how to pay our own bills. We would not consider a family that was dependent on government to be self-sufficient and flourishing, and we should not consider our state self-sufficient and flourishing if we are dependent on outside sources to pay our bills. And I think we need to say it loudly and boldly, because when we use placation phrases, it's not helpful for the legislature, and it's not helpful for the taxpayer.
Okay, so basically, just to make it clear, make sure there's no question, when bills come up that are going to be like they're strings for the federal government, we have to comply, or they're dependent on receiving your federal funds, you will be voting against those bills?
Highly likely, yes. I would love to give you a hard yes.
Uh-huh.
And so I say that because I read every bill,
Yes.
every single one. And so it's hard for me to say that I would vote against every single one when I haven't read them.
Yes, it's hard to say I'm going to vote against a bill I haven't read.
Yeah, but the reality is if it's accepted into nothingness, the chances of me saying yes to something accepted into nothingness is probably pretty low. And the chances of me saying yes to anything with a federal oversight, we have to, if we genuinely want to be a free people in this state, we need representatives who will stand strong and say, I don't care if they're giving us $5 billion. I would rather go without and let us do it the right way so that we can remain sovereign. I go back to that phrase, the power to tax is the power to control. Mm-hmm. And when we allow the federal government to lay their government regulation into our state, we are ceding our sovereignty one vote at a time. And we can't do that. We cannot continue to grow government in this state and expect it to stay sound. I see a lot of things come out about, the survey, U.S. News or something, Utah is the best state. And then I look at the qualifiers for what it takes to do that. And none of it has to do with good quality governing. It has to do with ideological compliance, installation of COVID mandates, all of those things. Great. So we score well in tyranny. Mm-hmm. We need to score well in liberty. And right now, I'm sorry, I just made you laugh.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, we need to score well in liberty. So yesterday, in the special, well, it wasn't the special session, it was in the interim committee. Mm-hmm. They passed a bill that says that when the federal government, they're changing Title IX to include men in Title IX, so it doesn't just protect women's sports, it includes anybody who wants to play in quote unquote women's sports. It includes men playing in it. Mm-hmm. And we just passed a law saying we will not participate in that. We are going to keep women's sports with women only in women's sports. Mm-hmm. Where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I stand very firmly on the side that a woman is one with womb. And that our grandmothers and our ancestors, if you will, sometimes ancestors a weird word, but our grandmothers did not burn their bras to give up their seat on the basketball team. They fought for equal access and equal opportunity and for playing fields that were not hand-me-downs riddled with mole holes. They fought that fight, and for us to give it up would be utterly asinine. I think that girls and boys are fundamentally biologically different. That has been proven over and over again. And I stand firmly on the side of girls having girls' sports without intrusion of their privacy or their prospects or their space on the team. That stated, I do have, I've taught for many, many years, and I do understand that there is a need for a third space. And if that third space exists, then so be it. But it doesn't get to be on the girls' team.
Right. So basically what you're saying, if the people that are transgendered, if they want to have participate, because biological boys that are transgendered, they are welcome to play on the boys' team. So it's not like they're being eliminated or not given an opportunity, because they are there. I've Absolutely. Never seen any man or boy that's saying, no, we don't want a trans boy on our team. So that I've never seen that. But then I do understand if they're like, well, I don't want to compete against boys. And so they can do what women did. Start your own. I'm totally fine with that. If you want to start your own, because I do believe personally, as a mother and a school teacher and a citizen and a person with a brain, I believe that sports are very, very helpful to young people. I think they are just, for so many reasons, they're beneficial. And I would like to see especially kids that are suffering from gender dysphoria, suffering with body image, suffering with maybe something that they identify with or belonging. Sports can be amazing that way and really helping us get through those formative years and those difficult times. Sports can be really therapeutic. So I really like the idea of kids that are suffering that way to be able to find a place. So, and if they don't feel comfortable in boys, I have no problem with supporting them in creating transgender teams. And, you know, that can happen in community. It doesn't have to happen at school. You can start your own. I know at growing up, we didn't have girls teams. I'm a lot older than you. We didn't have girls baseball teams. I loved playing baseball so much. And we would get all the girls together and the boys in the neighborhood. They didn't want us playing on their team, which is understandable because we kind of wrecked havoc. But we would invite them to come and play with us. And we wanted to win so bad. We were so competitive. We played so hard. And every single time they beat us, they slaughtered us. But we'd go back because we want to try to win. And they would play us. We were girls team, boys team. We would play each other. We would get slaughtered. There's just a biological difference that we can overcome with our will and our passion and our desire. No, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying as teams, there's just the reality.
Yes.
And I do feel that the compassionate thing to do is I think of myself as a very compassionate person. Maybe some people would disagree with me. They think I'm a heartless puke. I don't know, but I think I'm a compassionate, loving person.
I think you are.
And so there's two of us. And so I think that the best way to show compassion is through honesty. And I think Thomas Sowell said it very well. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, if you care about people, if you really care about people, tell them the truth. If you care about yourself, tell people what they want to hear.
Yes.
And I think that to me, that encapsulates the transgender movement. Tell them what they want to hear and they will like you. If you care about them, then tell them the truth. And Christina, what we all know, every person in the world knows, every scientist and every doctor that performs these surgeries knows one solid truth. You cannot change your sex. It's true. There's no hormones, therapy, surgery that can change someone's sex. So that is something that I feel really passionate about. And that is something where I feel like we can really trust you on. Are there any other, we're running a little short on time. And I just wanted to see, is there another issue that you feel really strong about that you?
Well, I could probably talk to you for days, Dalane, because I'm so passionate about many issues.
And we would have so many too.
We would. You know, I would go back to your issue and say there's nothing wrong with co-ed sports. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a third option there. And if I were to say I have another strong issue, it is privacy.
Thank you for bringing that up.
There are a number of bills, some of which have been run by my opponent, in which legislators voted to violate the rights of Utah citizens. In my opinion, the Fourth Amendment, and it was done on the taxpayer dollar. And so when we vote for our own imprisonment, I really take issue with that. Very concerned about privacy, specifically as it relates to SDG goal 11.2, some aerial devices. We've got some pretty nefarious legislation that's been run. And I would be happy to talk about that another time. But I know you have other people coming on today. I just really appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak with you and to be very frank about how I feel about this. Again, taxes has been my thing as I've gone through this process, because the mobilization of our tax burden is not tax relief. And we need to say that louder in this state. Just because you moved it to a new location doesn't mean you got rid of it. 2 times the budget equals 2 times the taxes. End of story. It's very simple math.
We're not printing money. We're not making it up. It's not growing on trees. if we're going to spend more money, the only way is to tax more
Mm-hmm.
to do it. And I just want to bring up something else, because a lot of people are talking about, oh, I can't vote for this person because they're immoral. This person's immoral. And I just want to say, increasing taxes on people, burdening people with taxes is, in my opinion, very immoral. It is an immoral act, because it is a way to put people into servitude. It is a way to put them into bondage. There are other ways to put people in slavery without chains and without, outwardly owning them. You own people through taxing. You own their labors. You own the proceeds of their work. And that is bondage. And I consider bondage immoral. In my personal opinion, I consider that a completely immoral act. And
I would agree.
So heavily taxed in this state. So I am so grateful to have a watchdog on that. And yeah, we will be, I think the service sales tax is an enemy. And we're going to see where people that are running for office, that are saying they're on the side of liberty, we will see. Yes. We will see where they really stand. And I ask everyone, we're going to need your help on this issue. We're going to need your help. Okay, Christina, tell us do you need any help with your campaign?
Oh, always. If you want to come knock doors with me, we have touched every door in District 16 one time, every single one.
Wow.
If you are a registered Republican in District 16, our campaign has touched every door. We are so excited to be able to say that. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of diligent focus. In particular, right now we're coming into the home stretch, and I would ask for funding. Clearly, if my opponent is taking in 10 grand shy of six figures in corporate income, then he's got more money than me. And so I would ask that the people stand up, and that if they are capable of doing so, I would ask them to contribute to the campaign so I can continue to reach more voters day by day as we come into the end of this race. And I would ask for the voter in District 16 to simply take a moment and say 28 years is too long. The incumbent in this seat has been in office for 28 years. That is too long to be in office, and we are in desperate need of a fresh look in Utah Senate 16.
Yeah, there is something about turnover, getting new people, new look, new ideas.
Yes.
And it is very difficult to have that kind of power and not allow it to kind of taint you. So that is the founders, that is the Republic, that is their design, is to have it.
Yes.
Pass the torch. Tell us your website. How do people get in touch with you, Christina?
If people would like to get in touch with me, they can go to cb4ut.com. And I see it's up right now. It's got a beautiful image of the Delaware. If you come to my town halls, I talk about this image and what it means to me. The Battle of Trenton, if you don't know much about it, it's a short story, if you will, to get to the crux of the issue. My website is very clear on where I stand on issues. And then it goes into my credentials, what I've been trained in, how I've trained, how I've served in Utah and throughout my life. And then it has a map, and you can connect with me. I get probably sometimes 20 connections a day from voters these days, and I call every one of them. And what I think is super interesting is many of them say, "I'm so surprised you called me back."
Yes.
I've put in a connect thing on for 12 people running for office. You're the only one that has called me back. Even the ones who are mean to me, they send me a nasty message, I still call them back. Because I think that's part of the job. Part of the job is saying, hey, let's find out why, and let's come to connect together so that you can understand why I think what I think, and I can understand why you think what you think. And sometimes we think the same thing for different reasons.
Right. Or we can find a place in the middle, or agreement, or at least understand each other, which is really important. And we are going to disagree, because we're not Step for Democrats. We are free thinking. We have our perspectives. And I just find that I learn a lot from talking to people who disagree with me. I learn a lot.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of my sayings. People will say, "Are you going to say it?" I'm like, "Yeah, disagree with me so I can get smarter."
Yeah.
I say that often. I need you to
Yeah.
disagree with me so that I can think about this through a new lens and make the best decision. And so when I'm actually at the table debating policy, I will assert my opinion and then I say, "Okay, someone disagree with me so I can be smarter." And that's very common in my world,
Yeah.
to engage in that realm. So definitely love to talk to everybody. And if my voters have questions or something they want to say, sometimes they're mad at me and they say things and I'm like, "I don't know where you got that information. It just didn't happen." Like
Right.
I can't
That
help you with
happens a
that
lot.
one.
No, that
Yeah.
happens in politics especially, but it does happen even in the world. And
Mhm.
people misunderstand things and people sometimes tell things that aren't true, but even people
Mhm.
can get, mixed up.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Christina, thank you so much for not only being with us today, but thank you for being just serving on the state school board, which is a very difficult job. I
Yeah.
regardless of your stance and where you are, it is a very difficult job. It
Mhm.
really is a thankless job. It isn't really fun. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate your work there. I think you've made a difference there.
Thank
And
you.
appreciate the things that you have done there. And, it's really great. I think no one should run unopposed. I think
Yeah.
every candidate is better when they have some opposition
Mhm.
because it makes everyone, learn and reach out, and it makes them be accountable.
Mhm.
Accountability is ever so the key. So
Yes,
thank you very much for
absolutely.
being with us, and we wish you all the best, and we will look forward to visiting with you again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Dalane. I appreciate
Thank
you
you,
very
Susan.
much. I hope you have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thanks, you too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes, we're loving this beautiful, beautiful weather this spring and the summer. It has been quite lovely. Maybe too hot for some people, but I've really enjoyed having not be freezing to death. I've really enjoyed it. So it looks like Representative Trevor Lee is having a little bit of a problem getting in, but we're going to discuss. It's weird. I emailed it to three different email addresses. So we are going to hope that we can get him in. I am going to, while I'm talking to you, I am going to attempt to send it again. It is very strange. And we will try this. Okay, we have two other guests that are coming up really soon, and we are going to be talking about a lot of different issues. One thing that I would like to encourage everyone to do, okay, elections are on Tuesday, June 25th. So it's very important that if you have been educated, if you have vetted the candidates, if you have checked to see where people stand and what they believe in, that you make the effort to vote. If you haven't gotten yourself educated and you don't know, then you still have time. You still have time to get educated, which I invite you to do. If you have not vetted the candidates and you have not gotten educated, I ask you not to vote, which is a very weird thing. I don't like saying that out loud. I do not enjoy it. But you do damage if you vote when you do not know what you're doing, if you haven't vetted the candidates. And that is what this is about. This is about giving you the opportunity to get educated so you can get to know the candidates and know what they believe in and what they're going to do. And that is difficult because as we try to do that, we do know from experience that people running for office tend to say what they know they need to say in order to win. And I just found out that Representative Trevor Lee has changed his email address. I sent it to 3 email addresses thinking definitely he'll get it in one of those. So I need to save this email address into my computer, into my email. But in the meantime, we should be receiving him any second. And so, as I was saying, I invite you to get educated. I am very happy for anyone to call me, to email me, and talk to me and ask me. I have written an email. I have papers that I have, because I have vetted every single candidate at least 4 times. I have met with them personally, every single candidate. I have talked to them. I have interviewed them. I've met them at least 4 times. I have vetted every single candidate and I have looked up their voting record. I've looked up their history. I've seen where they stand. So I will give you the reasons who I'm voting for and why I'm voting for them and why I am not supporting other candidates whom I actually love and respect and have a great relationship with, that I really like and admire, but I'm not voting for them because it's not about relationships. It's about who is going to be the best candidate for that position. Not who I like the best, not who I'd like to go to dinner with, who I enjoy, who, I've gotten to know and served with in other capacities, but who will do the best job in this capacity. So it's very important that we don't just vote, but that we get educated before we vote. I would like to express my love and appreciation for the caucus convention system. We are blessed in this state to have such a great system that it works so well. And it's not perfect. It's not like, oh, we never elect not very good candidates when we use the caucus convention system, because as I said, people will lie about who they are. They'll make themselves sound different. I shouldn't use the word lie. They will prevaricate, or they will maybe smush things around. But when we have a voting record, as the Savior taught, we judge people by their fruits. That is how we judge. That's how we know what they really believe in. So the caucus convention system gives us an opportunity for every single person in the state to go to the caucus and vote for someone to represent them. You get to decide who represents you. And then when they do that, we need to be careful that we elect people that are like-minded, who believe in the Constitution, believe in the platform of our party, regardless of what it is, and also someone who is going to do the job and go out and vet the candidates. And I make that commitment to every single person when I run. I will vet them at least 3 times. This time I did it every single one 4 times, and usually more than that. I interface with those people as often as possible because I want to see what they're saying to different people. I want to get to know who they really are. I want to see their aura and their light and see what they really believe in. And I also feel that we have this opportunity as the caucus convention system, when someone goes out and they vet the candidates, I feel like we're going to get a better candidate than when we make decisions based on radio commercials, posters, postcards that we get in the mail, TV ads. You can say anything you want. You can make anybody sound amazing in a TV ad. And so the delegates have a chance to meet and vet the different delegates, the different candidates. And so then they really know who they are. They have a much better feel. Speaking of which, we are so excited to welcome Representative Trevor Lee, who is a Liberty dad, not a Liberty mom, and he knows it. He knows he's a dad. He doesn't have to check. And he's been a great force for good in the legislature. He has served in the legislature the last 2 years and been amazing. And Trevor, you really have to know how to run a campaign, because you ran a campaign, an excellent campaign. And who voted for you? The delegates, between you and Steve Handy. Wow. They made it very clear. We want Trevor Lee. And that was not enough. You should have been done. But no, you had to run again with our crazy, insane system. Steve Handy did a write-in campaign, and you had to beat him again, and you did. Well, do you remember what the vote was on that?
Yeah, I ended up getting, he did pretty well for writing, considering he raised, $130,000, but it was
$130,000.
Yeah, he still got about 4,000 write-ins, which was a lot, compared to, I got 6,800 on the vote. So, I won and won easily, but it's still, money goes a long ways. And that's the problem. Anything outside of the caucus system, money is the sole factor and the driving force behind everything.
Money is the sole factor. So whoever, you either have a lot of money or you can get a lot of money. You can buy your way into office. You can buy your way onto the ballot. Why are we electing people who bought their way on? And why are allowing people who clearly, if they got all that money, 130,000, they are going to have to own someone else. They are owned by someone for that money. Okay. Trevor, our time is short. You have, again, you beat your opponent at convention. And should she be on the ballot?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's especially bad when you're a former party chair. You know, the very system you were in charge of to, drive turnout, fundraise for candidates, and believe in it. And then you subvert that entire system with money. And I'm going to say money that specifically you are getting from liberals, from PACs, from big businesses, because it's not hers. And it's not small dollar donations either. These are big companies that have bankrolled her ability to get on the ballot. One of those specifically being our governor. I mean, we had a special session yesterday, and instead of being at the special session, he was on Zoom to open it up because he's in my area campaigning with my opponent instead of being at the Capitol. I mean, it's crazy to see the lengths at which these people will go to try to subvert the caucus system and get on the ballot.
And they're using language that is very compelling. One vote, one voice, like one person, one vote. We should each be able to vote. Why should other people be able to decide who the candidates are? It's like they're being disingenuous because, like you said, prior party chairs know and understand. They actually, really committed to promoting the caucus convention system.
Right.
And yeah, so here you shouldn't even be in because your opponent got signatures. Is that right?
Correct.
You beat her over 60%.
Paid a lot of money for them. I mean, she may have gathered some, but her financial disclosures show at least $5,000 into signatures, which, look, if someone wants to go gather them, that's fine. But the problem that we're having, and see, this is the issue you're seeing right now with, and I'm going to go back to the governor's race. He gathered 28,000 signatures, and one of the companies he used to gather them just got indicted for fraud.
Right.
So should he even be on the ballot then? And look, if there really is that much support for any candidate, I don't care who it is, they should be able to get those signatures without paying for them.
Well, they should be able to get the delegates to vote for them.
Or that too, yes. I mean,
honestly, we shouldn't really be doing the entire signature thing because really the system that works, because even going out and gathering signatures, they really don't know you. Sometimes they're just putting their signature on to get rid of you. They might not understand the process, where delegates do understand the process, and you can get your people to go become a delegate. So
everyone's allowed to go show up, right? I mean, this is, you're elected by your neighbors in your caucus. And one of the biggest things I hear is, well, I want a chance to vote. Well, then go to caucus and
absolutely,
or, talk to your neighbors. And we have a big problem right now in Utah where, like in Salt Lake or even in Myra, you got 20-30% of Republicans in the party are actually Democrats. They infiltrate the party system. And you can do that as a delegate. Some have, but it's much harder because most of your neighbors know. Or if the caucus system is run out as supposed to, you ask them those questions like, did you vote for Joe Biden? And if you did, then why are you going to be a delegate in the Republican Party? I mean, you have a party that you can go to that will espouse your beliefs and uphold their platform. But our platform is to get those candidates forward who are going to believe it and support it. And there's not a better system out there than the one we have in place to do it. And the gathering signatures has completely made it almost irrelevant or disenfranchised so many people who actually don't go anymore because they're like, why even go vote if someone just buys their way on the ballot?
So well said. And every state used to have a similar system, and they've all allowed money and lies, frankly, to surrender their amazing system. We have the most amazing system in Utah. We've shot holes in it. The legislature did. But we still have a semblance of it. And it's very, very important that we get out and educate people and that we protect this amazing system. It is why we have more, it's why we have Mike Lee, frankly. Correct. It's the reason we have Mike Lee. It's how we got Jason Chaffetz. We could never have gotten him into Congress without it. And most of our people got in through the caucus convention system. And now we're changing that. It's a travesty.
Well, and to go along with that too, Dalane, just real quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but I was talking to some legislators yesterday, and it's really quite sad because we're going over some of these different races around the state, and it's, well, you're going to have all of your active, really informed voters. You're going to have those who get involved, and then you're going to have all the people who don't care that are also going to be voting. And that's who is essentially going to decide our elections. I talk to a lot of people. I knock a lot of doors. And, a lot of them will also admit, like, I don't really care. I don't follow politics.
Right. Yeah.
But if they're still voting, that's how you get candidates who aren't vetted properly. And that's a serious issue that we have. It's
a very serious issue because they don't care, but they're still voting.
Correct.
And the delegates care enough to go to caucus. They care enough. And I've talked to so many delegates this year, their first time being a delegate. And they're like, this system's amazing. This is so awesome. And I actually get to go visit, and they just are in love with it. They just think it's amazing. And so the more people we can get engaged and give them an opportunity to go be a delegate, that is really how we educate and involve people. And as Benjamin Franklin said, we have given you a republic if you can keep it. So you've got to be educated and you've got to be moral.
Yes.
Okay, Trevor, you've done some amazing things. Tell us what your plans are. Why should people vote for you over your opponent other than the obvious reasons, the caucus system?
Yeah.
Why did the delegates choose you? What did they see in you?
First and foremost, and this is something I would say is my biggest accomplishment, what I'm most proud of, is my area I feel like is represented by a conservative now. Not even just the bills I run that do come from my constituents, but my voting record represents what they would want. My vote is their vote. And for a long time, I believe that my predecessor was out of touch with what the area truly believes. And so that is number one. I have a great track record in just the small, short one term that I've been in office. I want to make sure that everyone understands where I stand on issues. So that's the first and foremost. The second is I'm very transparent and open. I don't have a legislative phone. I have my personal phone. I've always been accessible. I've always been available to talk, even if they disagree. I will make sure that they are heard. And if it comes to a point where I have a lot of people reaching out on an issue, that's where I am elected to make that decision. And I feel like the majority of people would like my conservative values and morals and would like to use that to guide my decisions when there is, maybe a controversial bill or something coming up. So that is the big one. It's what I'm doing. I would really like to know, and I get this a lot, what are policy differences or what are stances that are differences between me and my opponent? Well, I have that. You can find that out. I'm very open about it. There's no secret there. And so that's something that I would like to move forward is, continuing to make sure that my area is represented by someone who is conservative, who does share their values with them. And, we all have our place in the legislature, right? One thing I've learned is, the diversity we have is very organic. You have all different kinds of backgrounds within our body. You have doctors to lawyers to police officers to financial advisors. And I love that. I mean, stay-at-home moms. You have every kind of person you can bring to the table to help with the different bills. And, part of my place being in the body is making sure that they can count on me, my colleagues, as a vote for the conservative and good bills that we're going to move forward. And which once again, they don't believe they had that for a long time in my area, but now they do. And so that is also important. That is why I've been endorsed by all leadership, by almost every one of my colleagues, because they want me back. I work well together. We get things done. We make sure we bring stakeholders to the table on these issues. And I'll continue to do that. Make sure that if there are big problems, that we will be able to tackle them. And if I'm elected, we'll continue to move that good agenda forward instead of going backwards, which is where I believe we have a lot of the problems today from a decade worth of politicians who weren't listening or trying things that just don't work here in the state of Utah.
Okay, Trevor, that is really well said. And I just want to say, I did serve on the state central committee for a couple of years with your opponent. And I did find that I placed my votes. My votes were always aligned with our platform. I always our platform defines who we are. It defines what we believe in. Our tent is as big as our platform is. The platform is the tent. It's like, this is who we are. This is what we believe. So, and of course, as a constitutional instructor and lover of our Constitution, that is why I'm a Republican, because our platform is completely aligned. And so my votes were not emotional votes. They were always aligned with our platform and with the Constitution. And your opponent voted in contrast to me in opposition. We canceled each other out, I guess. Almost every time, like the majority of the time, we were in opposition. And I will say most of the time, most of the votes, the body did agree, because the body of the SEC is aligned with our platform. And and I found that there is a difference there. And I found you to be very aligned with the platform and with the Constitution. And I just think that that's, for me, a really big deal. That to me is, we don't need to know where you stand on every issue. If you're voting with the Constitution, and the platform, you're voting for us. You're voting for liberty. That's what
something I'd like to say about that, Dalane. See, this is one of the hard parts with running in any type of race, is the vast majority of people probably would have no clue what the SEC is.
Oh, good point. Yes.
They would also have no clue where those votes are and how that works, right? So This is, once again, I'm going to go back to, this is where the problem is with money in our race, or even in the state, is you can say whatever you want as a candidate. Yes. And money can buy your message to more individuals out there. Mm-hmm. And that's why it is crucial that if you are voting and you want to get involved, to try to understand the backgrounds with candidates, where they have been in politics, and what they have pushed for in their political careers. Or if they didn't have one, where have they been, or voted just in general elections throughout their lifetime. And that's one thing I would plead my case with everyone who gets out and votes across the state, or across the country. Really try to vet the candidates and find out. And if you don't have that time, lean into someone who you really trust and ask their perspective and their opinion on it. So, for example, people around you, Dalane, they're going to hopefully be asking you where you stand on issues, and they're going to rely on your knowledge and your wisdom that you have in those races, because most people don't have time and a lot don't care.
Right.
And so that's a big part of this, is can we make sure we get out that message and we get out those voting records and help people understand, well, hey, when so-and-so was on the SEC, they voted to keep CRT. When so-and-so was on the SEC, they voted to censor Donald Trump. These kinds of things are very important. And
they're very telling. This is how you know someone's ideology.
Absolutely. And that's the message we need to get out, is, did you know this about this person? And, you got to make sure it's factual and you can back it up. And these things are easy to find. And that's what I would hope most voters would do, is not vote just because of a name they've seen, but legitimately either ask the candidate, look at their material, or ask someone that they trust, who they know aligns with them on those morals and values.
Thank you so much, very much, Trevor. And just so people know, the SCC is the State Central Committee. So that's the governing body of people, representatives across the state who have been elected to run the party. And so that needs to be, our votes need to be aligned with our party and our platform.
Yes.
Trevor, to give everybody your, how to get a hold of you, what's your website?
Yeah, so my website is votetrevorlee.com, and vote, everyone knows how to spell, and my name is Trevor, and Lee is just like the great Senator Mike Lee. So it's votetrevorlee.com. You can get on there, you'll have my number, you can call me if you have any questions. I think that's usually the best way to go about it. We're all busy. I knock a lot of doors right now, but I will always get back to you. If I don't answer, I'll make sure that it's me that you talk to, not someone else.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Thank you so much for all the work that you have done. Thank you for being so principled, and we really appreciate you taking time out of campaigning to be with us.
Thank you.
And wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lane.
Really appreciate you. Thank you. Okay. There we have Trevor. I don't remember it. I should have written it down, but if you Google trevorlee.com, you'll find him, and great candidate. I really, really hope that we will send Trevor Lee back. The next guest we have is Monical Wilbur, who is running for the state, school board. Okay, there you are. Let's see if we can get Monica in here. Okay, fantastic. So our next Liberty Mom is Monical Wilbur. Thank you so much for being with us, Monica.
Thanks, Dalane. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Monica, you have been doing research. I mean, honestly, when I think of who has done more research on what's going on in our schools, in our public schools, Monica Wilbur and Natalie Klein are the two names that come up. I don't know which ones, I don't think you're in a competition, but you have really done a lot of research. Tell us, it might be self-evident, but tell us why you decided to run for the state school board.
Okay, that's a great question. Well, it all began a few years ago. In fact, back in 2021, when I got inadvertently kind of pulled into this education advocacy on behalf of parents like myself, who felt like our voices weren't being heard. We were seeing a lot of crazy things in the schools that didn't seem appropriate, and it seemed to come to a head, obviously like a few years ago. And I remember reaching out to my rep at the time and saying, hey, I'm seeing these things in the schools with my kids. One of my kids had to do a privilege walk. And if you don't know what a privilege walk is, it's you have the kids kind of line up on the same line in a classroom. And then you start asking them very personal, kind of invasive questions to find out kind of where they are in their social status. Do you have
things completely out of their control that they can't choose or decide?
Oh, absolutely. Right.
It's disgusting is what it is. There's just no way around it. It's disgusting. Shouldn't be happening in any institution. Go ahead.
Right. So, my son who had to do this, my mom is from Costa Rica. I am half Latina. My son who I have 4 kids. 2 of them are a little bit more on the Latin side, and 2 of them are on the pink side. They're very pink. There's not a race for that. They're just super pink. And so, my one son who had to do this, he has, the Latin look to him. And as he's doing this, he's just feeling very degraded. He's feeling very demeaned. And what's ironic is the teacher asked him afterward, she asked the whole class, write an essay about a time where you felt that you were unfairly judged or discriminated against because of maybe your race, ethnicity, etc. So he wrote about the privilege walk, which I thought was wonderful. And, that woke up his teacher to, oh, this is not an appropriate thing to be asking. She called, she was super apologetic, but she didn't quite see it the way that I was trying to explain, like, this is not okay. I know you're being trained to do these things, but this is not okay. And so I reached out to my rep. I shared this and other experiences with him. And his response was, do you really think this is happening? And
no, I don't think it is. I know it is.
I know it is. I don't think it is. I know it is. I'm seeing it with my own kids. And then his additional responses, well, I just don't see this the way you are seeing it. At the time, the board was voting on a rule, R277328, which basically implemented diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and programs and approaches in the classroom. It was the roadmap for this is how we achieve DEI. And DEI is discrimination in the name of anti-discrimination. It's not fair to anybody, right? It's awful. That really bothered me. It really bothered me to see that this callous disregard for, my experience, my children's experience. And so I started speaking up at the State Board of Education. I go there practically every month. I offer public comment. My board member never reached out to me. I'm not uninformed on these issues. I make sure I have my ducks in a row. My homework is sound. And then, here we came to last year, December, and I wanted to know if my rep was going to run again. I thought he did not do a good job being responsive to the concerns of constituents like myself. And so I reached out and I said, are you running again? Because your votes, you're a Republican, but you don't vote like a Republican. Your votes align 95% of the time with the radical left on the board. They implement bigger government, not smaller, wiser government in the classroom. What's your plan? And he said, well, I'll run if the people will have me. Well, I'm one of the people who was not happy to have him again. And so I waited and I wanted to know if anybody else was going to run, and it came down to just, look like I would have to be it if we wanted a voice that was speaking for normalcy and decency and more limited government and constitutional principles and pro-family and pro-freedom in our classrooms. So that's why I'm running.
Okay. So yesterday, as you're very aware, in our interim session at the legislature, they discussed the bill to make it so that Title IX, that protects women in sports and girls in sports, would remain in Utah as the Biden administration undoes that and allows boys to participate in girls sports, which does include more than sports, because that also includes women's spaces, bathrooms, locker rooms, things like that. So it doesn't just include women's sports, as Christina reminded us earlier today. That is, Title IX is sports, but when you undo that, it allows boys to go into the girls' locker rooms and private spaces and bathrooms. And even dare I say, like, if you're traveling for a sport, like you're going out of town and you stay overnight in a hotel, that would also include boys being able to share the hotel room with girls. So it's kind of a big deal. I mean, to me it is anyway. So anyway, we passed a bill yesterday, basically nullification, saying federal government, thanks for sharing, but we're not participating. We're going to keep girls sports, and we're going to keep Title IX only protecting women and girls. And so that's a big deal on the school board. What is your take on that? How do you feel about that?
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Okay. So bear with me on this. A year ago, my organization, Higher Ground, came out, and we had been following the developments on Title IX for a while. The state board has been giving trainings on compliance with the new Biden regulations, even before they were official, as early as November 2022. And so they've been anticipating this as a done deal. In June of last year, the Department of Ed put on an inclusion training, safe and inclusive schools for LGBTQI students. And it was shocking, really, to see, because it talked about implementing these Title IX changes, not regarding sports necessarily, and not regarding the bathroom spaces, but regarding other areas, in terms of using somebody's preferred pronouns and being required to, in order to be seen as not just affirming, but celebrating, and how celebration was the minimum expectation in the schools as far as treating LGBTQI students in a equitable manner. So, they have students on there. They have a student who identified as transgender, a boy who identified as a girl. He was in 8th grade. He was talking about being on estrogen. He was talking about getting another kid in trouble, having to do in-school suspension because this other child had dead named him on the bus. The implications are so far-reaching with Title IX, and we tried to raise awareness of that last year. Unfortunately, the board didn't seem to care. They seemed more interested in investigating Natalie for, basically a trumped-up charge. She was fully exonerated in that investigation, but I don't think it's coincidental that they launched their investigation of her right after we exposed what the Biden administration was up to. As far as I know, we were the only organization in the nation that was able to capture this training and put it out there on social media so that people could see for themselves what was going on. So the implications are broad, are far-ranging. We've helped parents with Title IX complaints. It is our position that it is sex-based discrimination to not provide sex-specific spaces for boys and girls. No exceptions, no excuses. So if we have any sort of loopholes in the law, we need to close those. We can't have exceptions for kids who have, for instance, privacy plans, and we have legislation that's currently on the books that allows for those exceptions, meaning, we still have boys and girls bathrooms. And that's not okay, but also not okay is, yeah. And if that falls right in line with what Title IX wants us to do. So as a state, we need to step up and we need to say, okay, regardless of what's happened in the past, what can we do now to close these loopholes? I think that's really, really important. And we provide those sex specific spaces so that we are not engaging in sex based discrimination. So that's my take on that. I kind of feel like the state board is late to the party. It's an election year. Suddenly they're like, oh, we want to be seen as maybe doing something, but we're going to ask the legislature to do something. They could have said something a long time ago.
I cannot understand that. I'm like, why do they need the legislature to pass something? They have authority over schools and over education. Why don't they just do it on their own? I don't pretend to know. It did fascinate me. I was totally taken back by that because they're always saying, legislature, this is our job, stay out of our business. And then it was really interesting to me to have them ask the legislature to pass a law so they can.
Right. It's a kind of a way of acting without acting. To me, it's a bit of passive aggressive. They could have done something a long time ago. They have specialists up and down at the state board who have thoroughly steeped themselves in these changes. They knew these were coming, but they wanted them. I think we have administration up at the state board that is totally on board with this. I mean, I don't just think, I know. I've seen documents, I've seen emails, everything points to this being the agenda that they want to push, this push of inclusivity. And, this idea that, it is empathetic. This is compassionate. And I think they're playing on these natural sentiments, the culture here in Utah, to try to push this through. But it's not empathetic to girls who have to be against boys. In fact, at the end of this Title IX event, you were, there, I think, up at the Capitol. This mother and her daughter approached me and Natalie. Of all the people there, she approached us. And the daughter told us that, she was in high school basketball sports and she knew she was playing against boys. Now we have a law that prohibits that. But, there's the law on paper, and then there's the law in practice.
Yes.
And it was confirmed at the hearing on Wednesday that, who really enforces these laws in the schools? Well, it's the schools. It's the administrators.
Or you mean who is supposed to versus who actually does it?
Well, they enforce it the way they can read it in the law. Okay. And I am a technical writer by training. I am also a former debate coach. I have experience in policy. I've helped write multiple pieces of legislation. Words are very, very important. And if that's where the wiggle room is found. And all too often, laws are made or broken in the definitions and in the descriptions of what they're supposed to do. And if there's strategic ambiguity built into the language, you can certainly bet that somebody who wants to read it a certain way will read it a certain way.
Yes. Okay. So thank you so much, Monica. So one of the issues that I'm really concerned about, and I've been working very hard on for the last 4 years, is the amount of pornography and the pornography that is in our schools. And I bring amount just because no amount is okay with me, but there is a significant amount of very disgusting and vile pornography in our schools. And so I would like to know where you stand on that and what you would do if you're on the school board. What would you do about that?
Okay, so I've already taken action on this. I helped Member Klein write a model policy 2 years ago in 2022 that would have asked and not just asked, but would have implemented a strict bright line reading of the law that has been there for, who knows how long, decades probably, as to enforcing, what type of materials can be in the schools and getting materials out of the schools that are explicit, sexually graphic or explicit in nature. By any objective reading of that model policy, it was much stronger, and it was very. We took out all the wiggle room we could. We tried to make it adhere to the law as it was written. That's not what the board passed. They went with this other model policy that was actually put forth by my opponent, Matt Hymas, and so he proposed it. The whole board voted for it except for Natalie Klein. And all it did was allow the schools to keep the pornographic materials on the shelves. If material was being under review for being pornographic, the schools could keep it on the shelves during the review. That was what the guidance issued. That's what the model policy said. It said that students could check out pornographic materials with their parents' permission. We don't allow that with other, forbidden, prohibited activities. Like you can't drink at school with your parents' permission. You can't take drugs at school with your parents' permission unless their prescription. This is illicit behavior, and yet, this is what the model policy allowed. So I've been working on that. I've been in discussions with the AG's office. I've been helping, there are charter schools who actually took the model policy that we wrote and they've implemented it as their policy, which is amazing, which is so good, because they saw that it was better and tighter, and they ignored what the state board gave them, which was a do more to allow it than to prevent it. So I've been working on that front. I've been working with a mom out in Tooele County who has been, keeping me apprised. She does a lot of these book challenges. My position is this: the responsibility, the onus, the burden is on the state. The state should clean house. Why are we putting the burden on the parents to make sure the state is doing its job?
Oh my goodness, Monica. I'm like, this is unbelievable that the system requires the parents who can't even get in the schools hardly. I mean, it's very hard to get into a school.
Yes.
The parents, the burden is on them. And I'm like, so that is my next question. Does the state school board have the authority and the power to just go say, here's the list of books that are inappropriate. You will pull these books from your schools, end of story.
Well,
does the state school, not you, does the state school board have that power and authority?
The state board can do whatever it wants in terms of administrative rules. They could at the drop of a pin. They don't have to, nothing precludes the state board from acting proactively. But what you have are, you have this division. So you have the state board, the 15 elected members of the board. And then you have the state board staff, which is controlled by the superintendent. Of course, the state board hires the superintendent, but then the staff is underneath the direction and the supervision of the superintendent. And we have a superintendent who doesn't seem very bothered that this is happening, because we've seen trainings and we've seen guidance that is, nobody else will see it, but I've been able to see it through grammar requests and other means of obtaining information. And it's funny because the training on the original bill, HB 374, it begins with the exceptions.
Yes.
And it's like, this is how you kind of find the loopholes. And if you can't find the loopholes, then I guess you're allowed to just drag your feet. This is why we're still seeing porn in the schools 2 years later. This is why parents are frustrated. This mom who sent me this, who's been doing these challenges out in Tooele County, she sent me these pictures from one of the books, and I really try, it's not fun stuff to look at as an adult. I really do not like looking at it.
Yeah, there's
And
some
she
pretty
says,
vile stuff in there.
it's
That's
super vile, super vile. And she's showing me, this is what I'm challenging now. And you know what? Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And if as an adult, it affects me this way, I can only imagine my poor children. My son, who was what was he, a sophomore at the end of 2020 when everybody had to, be put or went home for schooling because of the pandemic. He told me that he was assigned this pornographic novel. I think it was a part-time diary or the true diary of a part-time Indian, something like that.
Right.
And he's like, Mom, I didn't realize it was pornographic at the time. I just didn't read it because I didn't want to read it. And I'm like, that's good. We were doing school very differently at that time, a lot of upheaval. And we were living in we live in a part of West Valley where the earthquake, you remember when the earthquake hit?
Yes. Right.
That hit us pretty hard over here. And so that was a bit of a traumatic event for families in our area. At any rate, I think that was just a godsend that he didn't pick that up. But he said, kids know where to find these books.
Yes,
The
they do.
schools push them. Here's an interesting story. I went to a training by the Utah Pride Center, and they were doing, it was called, Pride Not Prejudice. And it was a training for students and teachers on LGBTQ in the classrooms and for administrators. And there was one teacher up in Logan who was bragging about her local librarian who would, and she said that this librarian would print out these papers and post them in the bathroom stalls about inclusive books, including LGBTQ books. And she literally said she tries to make them enticing. So here's a kid in the bathroom, and now he's reading basically an advertisement, or she's reading an advertisement for some sort of LGBTQ or sexual activity or behavior or whatever it may be. And yet this librarian gets recognized as the librarian of the year, by the district.
Right. Okay. Well, I think personally, I think this is a really super huge problem because we know scientifically the evidence is there that when kids are exposed to porn, they can easily get addicted. For them to overcome it. And I just think, a state school board should have a minimum standard. And this should not be an issue after 4 years. We keep looking to the legislature to fix the bill, and, tighten up those loopholes. But if we have a moral compass, it just seems like we would just go in there and get those books out and remove them. We would want to protect our children from this.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It just requires the political will.
Right.
And the education establishment, the ones that are pushing this, the radicals, the activists, they seem to dominate positions of power within the institution. And it makes it very hard for teachers. I have heard from so many teachers, I can't even tell you, and so many parents who are like, they want to say something, but they're afraid it might ruin relationships, it might jeopardize their standing at the school. And this is a very real thing. As a former teacher, I went through the same thing when I was teaching. When I inadvertently stepped out of line and I went to a board meeting to speak up on behalf of the debate program, which they were trying to cut in half. And I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. I didn't know that I was crossing a line. I was a fresh teacher. But boy, when you start getting those anonymous notes in your box at school, that are basically, veiled threats.
Yes.
You realize that and that was decades ago.
I'm just so surprised to see how many adults are actually standing in defense of keeping pornography in our schools. That has probably been the most surprising thing. Once I found it was there, which was shocking, then to find there were adults that were vying to protect it and keep it there. Okay, Monica, what other issues are you specifically concerned about? We just have a couple of minutes left. What else are you concerns for the state school board?
My biggest concern right now is that the state is creating and transforming education as we know it, by creating basically social credit scores for the kids through competency-based learning. That means they are assessing, scoring, measuring, tracking, and informing the kids' values, their attitudes, their beliefs as part of the academic process. You know, you've probably heard of it in the form of social emotional learning.
Right.
Well, imagine a profile, essentially, a transcript that is that where your child is graded and how empathetic they are, with a little bit of English or, math thrown in. This is not a good thing. This is shifting the focus of schools away from academics towards this character accreditation. It's not a good thing at all. Adults wouldn't submit to it willingly. Like, we don't want to have our attitudes being subject to a social credit score, essentially, where certain privileges will be either afforded us or denied us. We need to protect the rights of conscience in schools. It shouldn't be a matter of, hey, you have to compromise your conscience as a condition of attending school. We are spending so much right here. Right here up on your screen, you can see last year we spent $7.3 billion on education. Our proficiency scores, though, on academics are in the tank. And this next year, we're going to spend $8.4 billion. Where's this money going to? It's not going into making our classrooms smaller. It's going into a lot of ed tech contracts. We have a lot of problems up at the state board, and it's the teachers, it's the students, it's the parents who have to deal with the fallout when the rubber hits the road in the classroom. And these ones are the ones who are being shortchanged the most. I'm going to ask for, if you're still on the fence, go watch my debate. Read what I say. Look at who supports me. Read what I put on there. There should be a link on there, Monica versus her opponent. Click on that. You can see just some of the things. I mean, I've been watching the state board very closely. I could fill this page up with the differences between my opponent and me. We are not the same person in any regard. One talks the conservative talk, the other one actually walks it. And I'm the one who's been walking it. To the tune of thousands of volunteer hours.
We don't have a voting record for you, but we do have your fruits. We do know what you've been working on.
Yeah.
So one of the things that people say to me all the time, quite often, because no one can really deny your research, nobody can deny your commitment, because you've been really doing this for a long time as a parent and as a citizen. So one of the things they say to me, that kind of the only real thing that I find that anybody can come up with negative, they're like, well, I don't know that she'll be able to work well with others. So address that with us, Monica, because it is important to be effective. You're going to need to not just be alone. You're going to need to, in order to have an effective change, you're going to need to bring other people along.
Right. I mean, that's really what I've been doing. I've been speaking truth. And for people who have an ear to hear and a heart to sense it, that's what I've been doing, is speaking truth. And I've been doing nothing but working well with others who are also like-minded on these issues. To me, it just kind of makes me laugh. When I hear that criticism, it's the people who want me to compromise on the truth, who want me to compromise on constitutional principles, who want me to compromise our kids, who are making excuses for the system at the expense of the children, that say, oh, she doesn't work well with others. What they're saying is, we can't bend her. We can't make her, basically, go with our flow, when that flow is selling the kids down the river. And I won't do that. I just won't. I will, I have worked with lots of people who want the best for children and who understand that if you give away 10% in the name of compromise, but that 10% ends up undermining the 90% of good that you're trying to do, then, you've just wasted your time and your effort. That's not effective. In fact, you're going to these kids have one shot at childhood. One.
Right.
You don't have a lot of time to waste where kids are concerned. You can't say, oh, like the Attorney General up at the state board told me once, 3 years. In 3 years, we'll hammer out this gender identity stuff. The kids don't have the luxury of 3 years at all.
Don't. Yeah.
So you know what? I work great with lots of people. In fact, you can go to my references, you can go to my endorsements. That's just a handful of some of the people I've worked with. I'm very good at listening. I'm very good at pinpointing the problems, because I won't put on the blinders and say the system is perfect. It's not. Let's all just be honest about it. The system has, like every system does, and the larger it grows, the more points of failure you're going to see. If we can be honest, if we can pinpoint what's going on, if we can see where it's failing, then we can address those. And that's the only way you can fix a problem, is if you can see it clearly. And the solutions, I think, are obvious at that point.
Thank you, Monica. Okay, tell us your website real quickly, because we need to get to our next guest, but tell us your website.
Absolutely. So it's monicawilbur.com. And you can go there. You can also go to where I put a lot of my research with Natalie Klein, and it's higherground.work. That's WORK. And that's only some of it. It's so hard, to be able to put everything out there. But we put a lot of source documents so people can kind of see for themselves. Of course, interpreting EduSpeak, it takes years, I think, to kind of get the hang of it. So,
that's good advice. Higherground.org.
.org. WORK. Yeah. And if, feel free to call me. My email is on my website. So is my phone number. I love the calls. I love to engage with people and have good conversations. Like, I could talk education all day. It's a matter that's close.
Oops. Okay. We just lost Monica. Okay, there we go. Okay, so Monica, thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Higherground.work is a great resource. Thank you so much for being with us, and all the best to you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your great work.
All right. Thanks, Dalane. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have another Liberty mom, Kristin Richey, that is with us, and we're so delighted to welcome Kristin. Thank you so much for being with us, Kristin.
I'm happy to be here. Can you hear me okay, Dalane?
Yes, we can hear you great. And so Kristin is on the board of Utah Eagle Forum. She is absolutely a Liberty mom. She has really recently gotten involved when she's seen what is happening in our state. And I wanted to have Kristin on because she was at the interim yesterday, and it was quite an experience. There were a lot of things happening there. It was kind of an exciting day, a lot of things happening. There were a lot of actually good things, I think, that were happening, and mostly good things. But we're going to talk about some of the things that happened. So the first thing I want to talk about, Kristin, is the committee that was both a House and a Senate committee that met together, that was put together by Kristin Chevrier for Your Health Freedom. And they had an amazing guest presenter. Do you remember what his name is?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I went back and looked it up. His name was Aaron Seary, and he is an attorney. He's the managing partner of Seary and Glimstad, and they deal with cases dealing with informed consent, parental rights concerning mandated medical products and procedures. And he's represented a number of whistleblowers and has successfully challenged vaccine mandates and false information. So he's quite the guy.
He's quite the guy. And he gave an amazing
presentation
presentation. He gave a great presentation, and I want to invite everyone to go listen to it because it was incredible. And he didn't talk from a place of emotion or just like, this is how I feel about it. It wasn't a perspective like, well, I'm against vaccines because I'm against vaccine mandates. He really just presented the information in a very logical, very articulate, and very a way that he documented everything. So everything was there, and you can look it up. So you can go to le.utah.gov, le.utah.gov, and then if you click on June 19th, that will bring up, you have to kind of scroll down, and it will bring up the different committees. And oh dear, Kristin, this was in the, do you remember
Health,
which?
it was Health and Human Services.
Health and Human Services.
It was
So
at 1:15 in the afternoon. Yeah.
Yes, it was at 1:15 in the afternoon, Health and Human Services. If you go on there, then it allows you to listen and watch. And usually I listen to these committee meetings. I don't have time to just sit and watch them. If I'm at home, I'm like, obviously I'm listening and watching if I'm there. But when I want to review it, but this is one of those committees you're going to need to watch because he gives so much documentation and so much information. You're just getting overwhelmed. And even for someone who's researched this for 4 years myself, or really even more than that, I have been researching vaccines for 35, 40 years, 37 years. And this was really great information. And I would invite every single person to go listen to this. Now, Kristin, what are one of the issues that he brought up that you thought were especially compelling and interesting?
Well, it was outstanding, and I would fully recommend everybody listening to it. But you were there, Dalane, and I just remember right from the beginning, he spoke about the National Childhood Vaccine Act of 1986.
Yes.
And he said that the federal government in 1986, by passing this act, had pre-guaranteed immunity for the vaccine companies.
For all future vaccines.
This was news to me.
Does. It says anytime they make a vaccine, they cannot be held accountable. Can you imagine anything else? Like if my business, I could do whatever I want and not be held accountable. I'd like to think I have the moral foundation to still be honorable, but that just gives us carte blanche to do anything we want to because we can't be held accountable.
Absolutely. One of the quotes in his presentation was, no other product in the world enjoys this degree of immunity. It's really something.
It is. It's so broad. And I know they did it to help vaccine companies. It was done with the eyes of let's help them do more because they won't worry about they won't worry about being sued. But think about what are the real, possibly unintended consequences, but the real consequences of that. What happens to the safety of the consumer, the person, the patient, the person taking the vaccine? Do they have any way to ensure that the vaccine is safe and without serious consequence or life-threatening consequences? Because nothing can happen to the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, that was really startling to me. I didn't realize that. He gave a great presentation segment about how the clinical trials were flawed in this case, and he basically showed us. I'm sure you remember pictures of a young girl who was 12, who clearly was very affected by the vaccine. And he told us her situation. He said that she received the second shot and within a day was in the emergency room, was back for 2 more visits with abscess, gastritis, contact dermatitis, and other problems, and was diagnosed by the clinician with abdominal pain that was improving. And so he talked about how if the science fits the narrative, if it fits what they want to accomplish, then they use it. And if not, they drop it. And It was really kind of, that was really something else. The other thing about the clinical trials that I don't know if you just found just amazing. He had a video clip of a woman by the name of Catherine Edwards, who is a member. She's a researcher, and she's on the board of the Independent Data Safety Monitoring Board, I think it's called. She's on the board that evaluates the safety, the independent board that monitors the safety of vaccines. And she's employed by Pfizer. She's on the Pfizer payroll.
What could go wrong, Kristin? What could possibly go wrong with that? Like, how could that be a conflict of interest?
People, when they played the clip of her talking about there was no conflict of interest there, people laughed in the room. It was so obvious. It was like, you can't have the fox guarding the hen house. You know, you have to really have make sure there's not a conflict of interest when you're talking about results. Did you have that reaction to that?
Well, of course. And the thing that I found especially shocking too was that she honestly couldn't see why she's like, but I am independent. Well, just because I'm being paid by Pfizer doesn't mean I can't be independent. When they questioned her about it, she wasn't like, yeah, I know it looks bad, but it's totally, she just, what could be, what, there's no problem. I can be independent. I can get paid by Pfizer and still be independent. But if you look at the results, has she ever called out Pfizer on anything?
Yeah.
She's found them to be completely flawless in every case. So she can't say, well, yeah, look I found problems with this and I found it. Because do you think she would last very long being paid by Pfizer if she found fault? I don't know. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, that they would just automatically, but I'm just saying I'm just saying the facts, which I thought he did a great job just lining up the facts, saying she is paid by Pfizer and she's on the independent board. And can you do both at the same time?
Yeah, that was a real red flag.
Yeah, it's a real red flag. And it just says, and then he brought up so much evidence of the consequences that people have suffered because they were told that they were safe, that they were effective, and people were given, I should say, we were all told that it was safe and effective. And we were told that it was, it was researched and that there was research that was done, that they had trials, that they had clinical trials on it. Yeah. And they were being done while at the same time, the clinical trials were being done simultaneously with giving it out to people, to the general populace. Mm-hmm. They weren't, generally you do a clinical trial in advance, then you see the results from the clinical trial, and then you, based on those results, you open it up to the public. But they did the clinical trials at the same time, which, when does that happen?
Right.
And like, what, is it kind of too late?
One of the
trials, yeah, but you've already.
For sure. One of the most disturbing slides that he put up, and I went back and looked at it to make sure I had it written down right. He said that the VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, that actually showed that 7.7% of people who received a vaccine needed medical care of some type. Yes. And that 32% reported missing school or work or were unable to perform normal daily activities. And yet, did you hear much about that in the media?
No, yeah, I heard a lot about it from people who had that happen. I heard case after case after case. Those are the ones that were reported. Those are the ones that are counted that we know about.
Yeah. Again, his phrase, when the science fits the desired policy, it is followed. When it goes against the desired policy, it is ignored. He just hit the nail on the head. It was really
that is a factual, that is documented. You can see that. And don't we find this alarming? I find it alarming. I mean, I was already alarmed. Yes. But I do find it alarming. And I think, there was a lot of discussion about the mandates and about having mandates. But regardless of, even take all of this, take out all the stats, take out the congressional law to protect them, take all that out, let's just pretend they went in there and said 99.99% of people come off safe. It's never killed anyone. There's been very few even side effects with it. Even if that were the case, should the government mandate at any degree that anyone should have to take it? Should the government have power and control over our personal medical decisions, over our conscience and our ability to make these decisions for ourselves? Is there anywhere an employer or a government should have that power over people?
Absolutely not. It's completely unconstitutional.
Completely immoral, completely unconstitutional, completely out of line. And then you add into, we were not given proper information. We weren't given honest and being allowed, you make a decision. Here's the facts. Here's what's true. We weren't given that. And even on top of that, even if we were given that, it was a lot of fear driven. And there was very much a huge push to mandate it. Now, employers did mandate it. The government didn't, but they acted like it was a mandate. They didn't actually pass a law. There wasn't, but do you think that a lot of people thought that it was mandated or required?
Yes, I know my son-in-law felt that it was mandated in order for him to keep his job. He was very concerned about taking it.
Yeah, but he felt like he had no choice if he wanted to keep working.
That's right.
But I found even a lot of people thought that they had no choice, even outside of their employer, that it was like being mandated by the government because they were told to do it. And they thought they had to do it. And of course, there was a lot of fear and a lot of manipulation. So the reason for listening to this or for getting more informed, and I think the reason I'm just speaking for myself, I don't really know why the committee was being held and why they had Mr.
Hey, I'll get it.
Aaron, I believe
Aaron Siri. Aaron
Siri. So you'd think I could remember Siri because that's like Siri that tells you what to do all the time, you know. I mean, I don't have one, of course, but so Mr. Siri, I believe the reason there was to educate people and inform people so that the next time there is a push for a mandate, we will be informed and we will be more armed with the information to say, yeah, let's not mandate it. And we want information. But I have to say, 2 times, one of my heroes, I don't really have a lot of heroes. I'm not a person worshiper, but I love Representative Tim Jimenez. He just dazzles me constantly. He is so aligned with the principles of freedom and the principles of the Constitution. And I just loved, he made such good comments. And one of them, if you'll remember, was when he said, when they were saying, we just have to educate, we have to get out there and tell everybody, you know, and he's like, when the government tells people what to do, I think there's a word for it, propaganda.
That was so great. It was just so great.
He just nailed it. Yeah.
Yep.
Like we want truth, but when the government's peddling what they want you to do, we call that propaganda. So that was
really the best. Great. The best comment. Yes.
Yeah, it was. He made a couple of really good comments. So we had really, legislators, did you not feel that they were very attentive? They were listening well. And
yes.
I do think that it was also kind of a social experiment because, you know, we kind of have our belief systems. We have what we already believe. And as humans, we gather evidence to be right about what we already believe. And that was one of the representatives felt that what she was hearing there was not validating her belief system. And so she was wanting to call him out. I thought he did it. You know, she said, well, this doesn't align with this. And she said, do you even know what this is? And I thought he kept his demeanor. And he said, yes, I know what it is, and told her. And then he went through and was able to give her research and verification and validation. I am not a doctor, so I would not pretend to know all of that and understand it. But I thought, yeah, she was extremely contentious. That would be my experience.
Yes.
She was very contentious in that she didn't like it. She was having a very difficult time with it because it didn't align with her already belief system. And I think we all do it. So I'm not going to call her out. It's like, oh, she's, you know, I think that is human nature. I think we as humans do tend to want our belief system to be verified. We want to be right about what we already believe. So that's human nature. And it is hard to accept something that goes against what we believe. And yeah, that's an issue. So we don't have very much time, but I would like to move on for just a really quick. Do you have anything else you wanted to talk about that, Bill?
No, that's just great. It was wonderful.
It was wonderful. It was very interesting. And they did propose to open 3 other bills, but we'll talk about that on another show.
Okay.
Right after that was presented, we passed a bill in the state of Utah that forbids any more. If you've already sought transgender therapy or surgery or any help in any way, you can continue it. But it doesn't allow anybody new to seek therapy that's a minor. It does allow adults to, but it stops any new minors from receiving treatment for transgender treatment or surgery. And so the Equality Utah, and they had a professor. I don't know if a professor's the wrong word, but I believe she was a psychologist, and I think it's a psychologist from the U of U.
I think it was.
Yeah, she's definitely from the U of U, and she came and spoke and made a presentation about why we should allow new young people to continue the transgender therapy and surgery so that they could do a longitudinal study. And again, this is where Tim Jimenez was just a freaking rock star, because they were saying, we need to have kids do this so that we can continue to experiment on them, and then we can do a study, because you can't do a longitudinal study when you don't have patients, when you don't have subjects to do the study on. And since we made it illegal, they're limited on the study, because all they can do is study those who have already started, who can continue. So they actually can do a longitudinal study on those who are continue on and those who don't. So they could do one, but they want more subjects. And Tim Jimenez, again, Representative Jimenez, was so great, because he just said, because they're kind of dancing around it and not like speaking quite boldly and clearly. And he just asked straight on. So if I understand you correctly, what you're proposing is that we allow more children their bodies to be mutilated, and more surgeries and more therapy on minors, so that you can do studies. And the legal counsel there did just stay right out. Yes, we want to continue these treatments on children so that we can do a study. And what came into my mind, I don't know about you, but what came into my mind immediately was Hitler. Yes. And what happened to the youth during that time, when the doctors were given free rein to do experiments on surgeries, to perform all kind of psychological treatments on them, and frankly, the horrifying things, without a moral compass. And again, that is where Representative Jimenez, he said, wow, if we remove the moral compass and the moral platform from these kinds of things, then we're in really big trouble. Like, there's no telling what can happen. And I'm paraphrasing. You got to listen to him, because he did a much better job than I'm even reciting him. I'm not doing him justice. But I thought that was the real lesson there. Once we remove the moral code, we are allowed to do anything. That's what Hitler did. He removed the moral code and allowed them. And we look back in horror and go, how did people allow these kinds of horrific things to happen? And yet here we are sitting here, people sitting back, allowing this. Look at all the years we've allowed transgender surgery, and it's still happening. Transgender surgeries are happening in Utah and across this nation, while we see other nations putting an end, seeing the horror of it, and seeing that it is debauchery. It is purely evil. I do not know another word for it. And we've made some amends here in Utah. We're not done. It is, I think, just unbelievable that we are allowing this to happen. Kristin, do you have any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share?
Just that we live in interesting times. There's a lot of challenges, and every day there are opportunities, I feel like, to stand up.
Oh, Kristin, I can't hear you. And I love what you're saying. Every day we have opportunities to stand up, to speak out and to say the truth. Are you there, Kristin? Thank you, Kristin. Thank you so much for being with us. You're amazing. I have so much respect for you. You are a true Liberty mom. Thank you for being with us. And yes, every day we're given the opportunity to stand up. We are the guardians of our liberty, and we must be the guardians or we will have no liberty. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a beautiful day. And remember to guard our liberty.